Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of History After Hours. My name is Kevin Pumphrey, and with me, as normal, is Mr. Jeremy Nixon and Mr. Ron Franklin. We are three history teachers at Lakeside High School in Hot Springs, Arkansas, and this is our first live podcast of the new school year. We were able to meet in the old auditorium at Lakeside High School. There was no air conditioning working, but we made it through. And we want to give a big shout out to all the students who showed up. They asked some great questions. We covered a lot of topics. This was recorded on Thursday, October 7th, 2021. And I think it's a great podcast. We had a great time, and I hope you enjoy. Okay, we are having a very large live podcast in our old auditorium, and fortunately for us, the air conditioning is not working, so we're really excited about that.
Yeah,
it's wonderful.
But we already have a line of students ready to go because it is getting close to the end of the 9 weeks, and they need participation points. So, without further ado, state your name for the record, and then ask your question clearly into the microphone.
I'm Annie Rixby, and I was wondering what you think of pseudosciences like astrology and tarot cards.
Are you into like your sign, your astrological sign?
I am not.
Do you even know your astrological sign?
Yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you what it's supposed to mean or about it or anything like that.
What's interesting is we've had a lot of very intelligent people believe in it in the past, and there was people that thought there was a lot of credit to it, although there's very little evidence how much of it is. But what's crazy is like people of just average, if you just pull somebody from Walmart, even though they might not believe in it, they think there might be a little something to it. They'll read their sign and go, "Oh, that's me."
Right.
You know, but they're pretty general if you read
I have a
those things.
fun tarot card story though. I was on it was Memphis. We're out on Bourbon Street and tarot card readers, on the street and everything. I was just out of law school. I'd started
Bourbon
practicing.
Street's in New Orleans.
Oh yeah, I meant Bill Street. Sorry,
Yeah.
But I go to the ones on Bourbon Street too after this experience. So anyway, so Bill Street, and I'm this tarot card reader's, doing her thing, and she's telling me all these things like, "Oh, I see your career, and you work with children, and you teach," and I'm like, "You're completely wrong. I'm an attorney. I don't teach. I'm not going to be a teacher."
But then it came through.
And then, yeah, like 10 years later, I was like, "Oh."
So now analytical Nixon's
crap.
laying in bed at night going, "She knew. Somehow she knew. The stars all aligned and she knew it."
But because of that, when I go to New Orleans,
to answer the question directly, I will focus on the pseudo part of that science phrase. I don't believe in it, but at the same time, I'm not against the idea that there are perceptions beyond what we would generally have. I think there are people who are genuinely in tune with something like energy. I don't know if it's cosmic energy or whatever it is. I don't believe the stars control my destiny, but I do believe in energies that are beyond, we only have a specific visual range, there are animals in the animal kingdom that can see ultraviolet light and things like that, which would be freaky and cool. But anyway, so there's things beyond our perception. So I don't know, does that fit in with that somehow? Because it seems like everybody has one. Every culture around the planet seems to have some sort of astrological, zodiacal sort of belief that there's some energy that's controlling our destinies. I don't know. Yeah? What do you think?
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
All right, so just out of curiosity, what is your sign, Jeremy Nixon?
Cancer.
Yeah. You too? No, I'm an Aries. I don't know what that means for anybody, but there you go. All right, yep, go.
My name is Jack Henry Frisbee. So in Mr. Pumphrey's class, we have the wall people, which, are separated into presidents, philosophers, and they're ranked on how influential they are. And so one of them is pop cultures. There's just pop culture icons. And so I was wondering what y'all's opinion was on who is the most influential pop culture icon that kind of like either a boxer or a musical artist, but like who brought the United States together, or maybe just around the world. But just I was wondering what y'all think.
I know Mr. Nixon's answer is Taylor Swift.
He's going to start his rant now.
I was hoping, actually. Yeah. No, that's a good one. Who's top on the list on your wall?
Walt Disney is number one for creating the first entertainment empire, and of course Disney is doing pretty good these days. So they're still dominating
Not
the world.
him, he's dead.
Not him. No, he died in the 70s.
But his company.
But they're one of the 5 corporations that control 90% of the media, so they're not doing too bad.
How big is Disney outside the United States? Do y'all know? Like, I know there's like a Disney World and there's a Euro Disney. Is there one in China? Is there one somewhere in like the...
Yeah, China's a big...
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so that's interesting.
And then Muhammad Ali, I think he's on my wall. Muhammad Ali's the first sports figure. I mean, you had Jackie Robinson, but Muhammad Ali as a single figure without a team around him in boxing that really...
What about Joe Louis?
Joe Louis is my argument against Muhammad Ali.
Okay.
But of course, Joe Louis was more what he represented was great, but he was not really that political.
If you're thinking about the breakthroughs, Ali's huge, but so is Jackie Robinson, since you brought that up. Like, to break the color barrier in baseball, and I mean, and in a system that was not seemingly ready to change. Like, I mean, that guy, I don't know if you ever looked up this guy's story. It's pretty phenomenal what he faced and what he had to go through, and the violence against him on and off the field. Like, check American hero, Jackie Robinson. Y'all need to check him out. So, but I don't know who else would we say? Like, how far back would we go with that? Really, you know,
If they became an American citizen, they'd make the list. But all mine are 20th century figures. Can't think. I think.
I don't know if that there is a modern unifying figure. If you're going for unity, I can't think of one right now at the moment.
Who's the worst pop culture icon?
Don't.
I'll tell you what, when Oprah had her show, she was huge.
Oprah Winfrey is a good answer to that question.
She was huge. She's on my wall, I think, too, down there somewhere. And we talked about Sarnoff, I think.
Oh, is that the television industry stuff?
RCA, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we've talked about some folks like that. But is there the only person I think that comes close to that, like Elvis Presley, Michael Jackson status today,
Michael Jackson.
it might be Beyonce. But
You think Beyonce's got Michael Jackson status?
No, but I can't think of anybody as close, anybody else that's even in the conversation.
Michael Jackson still makes
Bruno
more money
Mars.
dead than I'll ever make alive yearly. Like, that guy's still making money. That's crazy to me. All right, we're running on time. Okay, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Brennan Wilkins, and do you think that our personal freedoms and liberties are still, or I guess that's kind of a loaded question. Do you think that our personal liberties and freedoms were ever taken away in response to counterterrorism? And if so, do you think they're still being taken away?
Yes.
And to what level?
All right, go political science man.
Well, I mean, I think the greatest at their peak, it's the Patriot Act. I mean, universally, because in a weirdly unifying moment in American history, they passed sweeping surveillance of citizenry, and they left it mostly intact for about 14 years. We talk about this a lot in AP Gov. The sneak and peek warrants, they can actually be in your house if there's an open investigation and not tell you. They didn't have to tell you about it ever until you were charged, and then they changed it to 30 days because, there's that pesky thing called the Fourth Amendment. So, yeah, absolutely, in response to 9/11, we did some really, really bad stuff for our own privacy. We gave up a lot of liberty to secure protection, so to speak.
How would you compare that to what happened after Pearl Harbor?
Well, that's hard to do, I think, mainly because...
Or Civil War with the.
Yeah, we have a history, and we're going to... Whoa, my mic just went up.
Well, bulk data collection wasn't possible for Pearl Harbor or at the Civil War. I mean, they literally have everyone's data on servers that were being held by the United States government. And they still do, but they're getting around that because they're now privately owned by AT&T, Verizon, whoever. So technically it's bypassing the Fourth Amendment because the government is no longer the one who have ownership and control, but it's that third party, and they're still there, and they still own your data, and we sign our lives away every time we click agree without reading the terms and conditions.
Well, let me just jump in for all you AP U.S. history people. Tomorrow, Chapter 10 is due, and you should know about the Alien and Sedition Acts. The first time we really pushed on the First Amendment rights because we thought we were going to go to war with France. So that was like, so we have a history since the very beginning of taking away rights when we feel threatened at all or think that there could be some behavior that is not patriotic when we're at war or in a time of crisis. So,
Do you think that that's necessary then to control things to that level when you aren't sure who's friend and foe? Because we complain about stuff. We go, you're taking my freedoms. Well, isn't there a reason why that might be necessary given the right circumstances? Like, people go, it's government overreach. Yeah, well, calm down, bro. Like, things happen, and maybe we need to do some extra things because you don't know everything. Maybe they know more than you. Maybe they know more than you. I'm not saying they do, actually. But they might have more intelligence gathering capabilities than you do, and maybe there's an existential threat that they know that you don't. That maybe we need to lock stuff down and so that it doesn't create a better or a more drastic negative situation for the society.
See, I'm always going to be more on the side of liberty because...
I'm not advocating for it, I'm just asking.
No, I know, but I'm just saying that we tend to knee-jerk in our society, and if you look at what happened with Japanese internment, that's, American citizens...
But just to play devil's advocate, was there a need for that?
No.
Although there were Japanese spies.
Sure.
So, yes, there was not a need for that, but... At the time when the unknown is unknown, it's easy to look back and think, oh, yeah, that was... Obviously, we went way too far with that, but you can even take smaller examples. Here's what I will always say. It generally ages poorly. Whatever freedoms you limit or take away, if you fast forward 10 or 20 years and look back on it, usually people go, oh, we shouldn't have done that. The government shouldn't have done that. But when the unknown is unknown, it's probably easier to make those decisions in that direction.
Any validity to the idea that those internment camps actually helped protect people from the racism and the violence that they could have experienced at home?
So we're going to protect people.
No, I'm not. Again, I'm not saying it's a good idea. I'm just asking a question.
No, I don't. I mean, you could argue that, but I think that's inherently against the American principle.
America at war.
Still America. Our Constitution still applies if you're a citizen.
It's easily suspended, apparently.
Not according to the Supreme Court.
Well, it's happened in the past multiple times.
Right, but the argument is that it's always been found unconstitutional after the fact. And so that's the problem. It's the person acting unconstitutionally.
Up till now.
Up till now.
Which, by the way, could
See, but that's the problem
change.
Arguably that's the problem with our court system because they're reactive. So the unconstitutional act continues until judicial review.
Right.
And then it can be years after where they're like, bad president. You shouldn't have done that.
But to Pumphrey's point, though, is that just like looking back after the fact going, well, we should feel sorry about that. I mean, in the heat of the moment, what decisions do people make to try to, is safety and security not the prime goal? I know that they go, well, it was unfair to those people. True, but do we look at the larger set of societies? And we were, the immediacy of the aftermath of the attack of Pearl Harbor, plus the fact that we're now at war we're going to be in 3 different spots around the globe. I mean,
by the way,
we're
arguing,
vulnerable, obviously.
What we're arguing is a central question of the entire founding of America is how do you balance law and order with liberty? And it's always doing this, depending on the crisis or non-crisis or peacetime or war. Sometimes liberty is enhanced and sometimes it's taken away. But that has been a question since the very beginning. So we're not going to come up with a 100% solution, but I think we all three agree the side of liberty is always preferable when you look at the grand scheme of things.
Well, the more precedent you set that erodes rights, the future, it gives more leeway in the future to take them away. So every time you set a precedent where rights are rolled back, you've got history to look back on and say, oh, we did it then, we can do it now, and we're going to keep it going forward. And that was one of the arguments in Anti-Federalist 1. Brutus 1 said power once taken is never given. So every time the citizens give up power, it's never given back.
Is this why you're against wearing masks? I'm kidding.
Yeah, so again, I don't want to misrepresent myself. Though that's not my personal opinion. What I was saying, I was just trying to push buttons to see what you would say. All right, go.
My name is Maya Shroff, and I was wondering, at what point do you guys think America will run out of water and when people will begin to fight over it?
Canada has plenty of water, and I'm sure we could take them. So,
Yeah, we got to steal other countries' water. And bring it back.
Fresh water is a big deal, though. I mean, ask Detroit and Flint, Michigan, and some other big cities that are having trouble getting clean water to their people. You have plenty of water, it's just not clean water, so maybe we focus on that. What do you think about it? I mean, we are polluting it at a pretty high rate.
If you know when it's going to be gone, let us know. I'd like a little heads up on that.
Yeah, is that why all the water bottles are gone at Walmart right now? There are no water jugs. I don't know.
Can we not desalt the ocean?
We can.
Is it just not efficient? Or
Yeah, it's not
exorbitantly
efficient.
expensive, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, desalinization is a thing, but it's very expensive, and a lot of cities can't afford it. And
Why is it so expensive?
yeah, that I don't know.
By the way, if you're looking for a career, anything in this
Figure out
area,
how-
if you could
how to do
figure
that.
out some of this environmental stuff, that would help us all out. So, and you'd probably make $1 billion.
Yeah, be a pal,
Do you think there will ever be war over water?
probably. I don't know that it'll be within our lifetimes, maybe yours.
Well, I mean, sometime there'll be conflicts over water. There have
Yeah.
been before, water rights at least.
There's wars over salt.
Well, that's
wars over.
Yeah.
That's why I'm making Comparative. One of the first things they do is they have a newly formed state with 4 distinct ethnic groups, and they have to figure out which one gets water, and they have different characteristics. Yeah, they killed some people doing that, but
Well, yes.
My name is Chelsea Geronimo, and my question is, what is your perspective on the gender pay gap, and how do you think it affects our economy?
Gender pay gap. You've hit this one before, so I'm gonna let you run with that. I'm gonna let you.
It's
like
not
I'm in charge.
controversial at all.
Yeah.
Okay, there is a gender pay gap, as we know. I don't know what the exact number is compared to the dollar. The problem where it gets a little confusing is gender is only one factor in this scenario. So once again, if we have a democracy and liberty and women and men and whoever can choose their professions, generally speaking, women choose professions that are lower paid. They're also more agreeable personality-wise, generally speaking. Once again, all this is generalities like crazy. But if you're more agreeable, you'll probably not get that top office CEO. You'll probably be satisfied with a little less. There's about 10 major factors that cause the gender pay gap. So it's not just because you're female, you get paid less. That is one factor, but once again, there's like 10 other factors. And this is my argument against just shoving females into roles just because they're females. Like, well, America's 55% female, so we should make sure that the House of Representatives is 55% females and the Senate is 55%, because what if they don't want to be a senator? Or what if they suck at it? I'm still under the delusion that we should pick the best people for the job regardless of all of that stuff. But as far as the gender pay gap, it's more complicated than just that. Now, once again, that gender is definitely a factor in that, but it's just hard to prove that that is the only factor. Amen. That's all I know.
well, you also have to look at the types of employment, because if you look at government employment or like just say public schools, there's much less of a gender pay gap, and it's because of transparency laws. It's because of like if you take us, we're on a salary schedule. It's dependent upon education and years of experience, and it doesn't take into account any of those things. So there is less of a gender pay gap when you're talking about those types of jobs that are government jobs.
Or any caregiving, like caregiver, health care, and these are also, a lot of these are female-dominated fields, which is another thing that can skew the...
But where you really see gender pay gap is more of the private corporate world, and they're struggling to make inroads and to catch up. But like you said,
Do you think it's because it's an entrenched bias?
It's multi-causal. There, like you said, there are so many things that go into that, and it's...
Now, the one field that you can't really throw into this is entertainment. Now, it is definitely true that actresses get paid less than actors. Just like female athletes get paid way less than male athletes. But that's a whole different ball game because they're based on, obviously,
Ticket
viewership
sales.
and ticket sales and all that, and the male athletic sports tend to get way more money. And so it's hard to just make that equal. But that is an argument that people are having now about trying to level out some of that inequality that does exist based on gender.
Alrighty, interesting. Yep. My name is Grayson Farner, and I was wondering how the federal government affects us as students and the direct interactions we have with the federal government.
I mean, you as students don't have a lot of direct interactions with the federal government unless you're doing something you really shouldn't be doing. You have much more indirect interactions with them, basically because of school funding. Mm-hmm. That would be the biggest area, and I don't want to get bogged down in that, Title I and those sorts of things.
Well, at least, brief overview then. What's Title I? What's Title IX?
Well, I mean, it provides federal funding for things like reading initiatives. It provides federal funding for parity in sports. It's supposed to provide equal access and opportunity. It's supposed to help lower socioeconomic districts. It's about parity. All of them in some way are about parity and equality, trying to level the playing field. But that would be the closest thing to a direct impact. The federal government, we talk about this in AP Gov all the time, the federal government is the furthest thing away from you. The most important thing in your life is your local government, and no one ever pays attention to it. And then it's your state government, and very few people pay attention to that. And then it's the federal government.
Yeah, when I talk about this in class, it's like when you vote, the last thing should be on your mind is who's the president. But that is actually the first thing on your mind because that's what everybody yells about. But really what's more impactful is locally, who's around here, and all those things you have to read to vote on, that affects you more than, who's the president is or whatever.
Maybe a direct thing it's not constant until you hit 18, and then you have to, you're going to have to register for selective service. Like that is a direct impact on your life because if you don't, you can get, arrested and sent away. There's no draft, but if there ever is a draft, they hold that in reserve. Along that line, since we're talking about gender sort of balancing and whatever, do you think that there will come a time, since women are openly serving in combat roles in the military, that there will be that females will have to also register for selective service?
If I'm not mistaken, there either is or there is discussion about a bill being put forward in Congress that would require it.
How does that affect trans individuals?
I'm not sure.
Currently.
Well, the past administration wouldn't allow them to serve.
So. No. I mean about selective service. Like, if I've transitioned to female,
yeah, I mean,
would I have to register for selective service?
Yeah, I think that would be a requirement if trans people are allowed to serve in the military.
Oh well, right. Yeah. Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, interesting. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Roman Lancaster, and do you think the U.S. will set regulations on Bitcoin anytime soon like China did?
Well, China banned it.
Yeah, they're trying to kill it.
It's kind of hard to say. I think we probably will at some point because, we talk about this in Comparative. Money is a thing because a sovereign nation says it's a thing, and they accept it and control it by fiat. So anything that undermines their own currency, eventually they will probably regulate. So my gut would be, yeah, at some point.
Is it controllable if people are using it as a bartering tool?
Well, I mean, that's where it's much more difficult, right?
So how is China? I don't know the ins and outs of this. I just know they did, but they just refuse to. Is all the avenues to getting Bitcoin?
Well, it's internet
blocked?
mining, and so they've basically shut down.
I know you can't mine it. They're really worried about that,
right? And that they've.
And their argument partly is about the environment because China cares so much about the environment.
Yeah, we talked about
which they don't.
Isn't one of the reasons people are excited about Bitcoin and did it in the first place is because it's so difficult for governments to control and regulate because it's international.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's the idea. That's the appeal of it. It takes away monetary power of sovereign states.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
There's that argument in comparative politics of whether the state is actually going to remain and whether that's the next organizing factor or are we moving away from it. And Bitcoin would be away from.
Yeah. But cryptocurrency is so volatile though. Yep. I mean, you can see it rise and fall just within a matter of hours. I mean, dramatically. What was sometime last year when Elon Musk was we're no longer going to accept it, it plummeted. People who had $50,000 in Bitcoin the day before, suddenly they were, I've lost millions. I mean, if it can hinge on that kind of moment where somebody in a corporation can make a statement and all of a sudden the whole thing comes crashing down or takes a precipitous drop, that instability should scare people away from it ultimately. But I don't know that much about it. What were you? Was it? Oh, it was Dogecoin. Oh, my bad. Okay, so but my point was cryptocurrency in general.
Dogecoin is
Well, okay, but I got you. But at the same time, there is volatility because it's not controlled by economists, essentially, right?
Yeah, there's no Fed, there's no central bank that's regulating and controlling the amount that's out in circulation, or trying to hold the value steady or combat inflation or any of that.
Is the appeal of it the fact that you can sort of just, is it like a treasure hunt kind of thing? Is that where people are like, oh, it's awesome because I can get it without having to work for it in some way? I mean, I don't know much about it. I'm just speculating. So, alrighty, cool. Yep.
Hi, I'm Joe, and I really thought about this question before I came here. My sister's a psychology major at A-State, and I was like, hey, what's a good question I can ask these guys? And one really big debate right now, especially at ASU, is, hey, is psychology a science? Can it be boiled down to a science? And I really thought about it. I was like, why would it not, personally? And apparently it's a really big debate right now, so I want to know your take on it.
Well, I mean, we talked about this early in my class, talk about how history and generally, you can't get it down to a science. There was a group called the Positivist back in the day that thought we could come to a truth that was universal. And so any social science like psychology, sociology, even economics, I mean, think about it, we hadn't figured that out. So, hey, here's another billion-dollar ideas. Give us the next revolution in economics. We hadn't had a good one since Adam Smith. But anyhow, that's the thing about humans. We're complicated creatures that constantly change. It's hard to boil that down to a hard science like, the cosmos or rocks or whatever.
Like there's no
Geology.
There's no Newton of psychology where he's like, this is exactly how it works, and here are the numbers to back it up. So on one hand, because there are people who try to control and do study, and I mean, so there's a scientific approach to it. That doesn't make it a full-fledged science.
I taught sociology for a couple of years, and there are definitely generalizations you can make about groups and groupthink and mob violence and all these things that are facts and are true. But then, of course, it's just a fluid little thing because at the base of it is humans, and it always makes things complicated.
You never know what we might do or say.
Yeah, well, I mean, political science is the same. It's literally, science is in the name, but the amount of hard science you can do in it is extremely limited. So, I think it falls in the same category.
And this is where you start to differentiate between truth and fact, which we talked a little bit about early on.
Next.
My name is James Johnson. So when Thomas Jefferson was giving his opinion on the reaction to Shays' Rebellion, he basically said that the government, with their reaction to the rebellion, were acting like wolves and turning the people into sheep, basically. Do you guys think that with things like the Patriot Act, and ways that the government is slowly starting to encroach on our rights, do you think that the government is turning into wolves to an extent?
I was actually thinking Shays' Rebellion when you were talking about Patriot Act a while ago, so it's funny that you brought that up. So the ultimate question was, do we think that the government's turning into wolves currently, and that they're predators against the rights that we have as sheeple?
Well, politics plays a big part in perception and all this as well. So when you look at the Patriot Act and the efforts after 9/11, the right was pretty okay with all that, and it was the left that started to have trouble with some of that stuff. And then today, when you look at what's going on, it's the right that's kind of having trouble with some government mandates and whatnot. So politics in our current climate, with all the communication we have, it is interesting how just not knowing what's going on in the government can turn people against everything, and I think that's what we're seeing. But yeah, so he's right. Yeah, Jefferson was saying it's not the mob violence that does it, it's the government overreach that actually really divides the people. So how do y'all think about that?
It's hard. Okay, this is the complication of histories and political sciences, because depending on how you look at that, it's predatory. Some people might feel, well, it's too much, it's overreach, they're getting in my lives. Why would they mandate this, and why would they push that, and why would they refuse to fund this if we don't do certain things? Or like you said, restricting travel. I just think about going to the airport, and we haven't studied 9/11 with some of you guys yet, but the day after 9/11, it's like, oh, we got to lock down the airports and all things are different. The day before 9/11, you could get on a plane literally within 30 minutes of arriving at the airport. Show up, park your car, run to the terminal, buy a ticket, and then jaunt over to the plane and get on just as it's about to close the gates. Like that is forever gone. So have those regulations helped us or hurt us? Well, again, it depends on who you ask. It's a pain in the ass to have to show up to the airport 3 hours early to maybe catch your flight, as opposed to, well, we haven't had another major incident since then. So are those necessary regulations? How much of it's predatory? How much of it is necessary in the climate in which we live? Could we back off of those now that things haven't happened in a while and we have gone after 20 years with a war on terror? Can we relax some of those restrictions? Maybe.
But if I see another 89-year-old woman getting, shake down.
I know.
Chair, I'm just like, oh, really?
But again, that's
everybody's time.
That's the complexity.
That is
because
the
on one
complexity.
hand, Granny might she might be strapped up with a.
And it has to be random.
You don't know.
Stereotypes. It has to be a random search.
Chances are she's not. My 75-year-old mother every time she goes to the airport, they think she's a terrorist. I guess she always has to go to the side, man. Always. And they do the little thing where they check your hands and stuff and do the gunpowder sniffing dog or whatever it is, And she's
the person behind her's got the hood on, got the trench coat.
She's just this granny, and they're like, sketchy boy behind her just cruises through. I don't get it, but whatever. So is that a hassle? Yeah. What do you think? I took up all that time. Sorry.
No, look, I think that there are several instances, and there have been and will be, in which the government takes liberty of the people and doesn't give it back. I truly believe that. I think they've been doing it since 9/11. Do I think they'll do it further? I think that depends on our reaction to it. I think that at some point we have to have a voice and we have to start holding people accountable. We re-elect Congress at about 96 to 98%, depending on if you're talking the House or the Senate. So why don't we ask them, hey, why did you reauthorize the Patriot Act, say, 7 times? And we don't do that. We don't get engaged. And until we do, government's going to keep doing exactly what government wants to do.
Yep. Next.
My name's William Ivey, and my question is, what initially motivated you to start teaching, and what keeps you motivated day to day?
You first.
I fell into it. I was an athlete. I got hurt, so I thought I'll coach like a lot of people do. So I coached. I hated it. There's a big difference between coaching and playing. I found out because for years I was the best player on the team, yet I was the coach and couldn't get help, and I just saw these players that didn't love it like I loved it, and it was nothing but frustration. But during that time, they forced me to teach history. You got to teach something. So I started teaching history. I hated it the first year. I hated it the second year. But by the third year, I had a good mentor teacher that was helping me out. By the third year, because I was learning about it really for the first time. That's when you really learn, is when you have to teach it. And so this is eons ago, but I fell in love with history. And then I thought, when I moved finally after several years, I thought, man, if I could get a teaching job without coaching, that would be awesome. And I did, and I've been doing that ever since. And I love it. But I fell into it. I didn't receive a calling at 7. You're going to be a teacher.
What keeps you in it?
The money? No, of course not. That's laughable, right? Yeah. No, I just love it. The thing about history, I guess, is there's never an end. I'm curious by nature, as you can tell. I love doing this. I love learning from these guys. So if you love learning, history's a great subject to teach because you could go, you could read 10 books on Shays' Rebellion right now. There's so much to learn, and the more I learn, the less I really know. I was more confident about teaching history 10 years ago than I am now, because I know more and I realize how much is out there. So I don't know. I love all this stuff. So yeah.
My story is slightly similar without the athletic part. I managed retail stores around the state in my earlier days, and my wife has taught for almost 10 years longer than I have. And so she was always like, you should think about going teaching, especially when I would come home tired and complaining about being a retail manager. I'm like, it's a overwhelming sort of tiredness having to deal with all the things that you do when you juggle a corporate kind of thing. So she's like, you should go back to school. And so finally I got the opportunity to step away from the retail environment, went to school, wasn't even sure what I was going to do. I thought about science perhaps, because, maybe I didn't, so I kind of fell into history. I'm like, I've always kind of liked trivial stuff and, digging in, kind of like you're talking about, like researching, there's this new thing, here's this new story. But I wasn't willing to coach, even from day one, which a lot of people thought was a mistake. They're like, you'll never get a job. You will never get a job teaching history if you don't also have a coaching thing. I would tell people, I'm going to school, I'm going to be a teacher. They go, yeah, what are you going to coach? I'm like, no, you're not listening. I want to teach. And like, it's impossible. I just tipped into a job as I got out of school and realized that this is like the greatest thing I've ever thought about doing. I absolutely love this job, day to day, minute to minute. There are some tiring moments, but it's different, and there's that rewarding element. Just the fact that we can sit here and talk to y'all like this is one of the things that keeps me going too, just that continuous, even though we tell the same stories year after year, we might learn new things and add things into it, but we're teaching it to a new group of people every time, and your responsiveness and your actions and your new questions that might go, oh, I never really thought about that. Like, I learned from y'all too. I mean, so that keeps it fresh every single time we go through it, so.
Yeah, I mean, most of you all probably know my story. I practiced law for 10 years. I worked in government. I ended up on the politics side of it. I started that because naively, I believed in public service at one point. If you take my AP government class, that's changed. It was that whole Leslie Knope mentality if you're a Parks and Rec fan. And then one day I just went, God, I hate this. Nothing that I wanted to do is possible. And
at what point did the curtain fall for you on that one?
Well, that's a long story, but the short version is political backstabbing. And I just went, I still love, I love the law. I love political science. And I was like, what do I really want to do? And I was like, I want to teach it. And so I did. And I do love it. But what keeps me going is the same as you guys. It's the interactions. It's getting to know people, teaching new people, and learning.
I'll add in that the team that we've developed right here can't be duplicated anywhere else. We talk to so many people around this area and around the state who go, you guys have built something special right there. And I'm not bragging on us just to be bragging. I mean, we're a team, and we work with each other, and we push each other to be better, and I dig that too. Part of the reason why I continue to teach here, not just teach.
And also, if you notice a life lesson here, none of us intended to be teachers when we left high school. So if you think, oh, I know this is what I'm going to do, well, let's keep our options open and make sure, that because most of you will change your mind before you're 25.
Yeah, that is a life skill. Be flexible with what you think you're going to do. Be open to opportunities and possibilities.
Okay, so there are different stories that people say are true about Anne of Cleves, one of Henry VIII's wives.
Yeah, right.
Some say that they were divorced because he just didn't like how she looked, and others say that they were divorced because, he thought that true love would shine through, and he sexually assaulted her in hopes that she would realize that it was him. Is there...
Okay, so let me add a little bit of backstory there. Henry VIII, if you're not aware, was a very self-centered person, but he's a king, so that kind of makes sense. Lost a couple of wives through other adventurous things. And so he was having a hard time sort of adjusting to his new single life and was really, really depressed. So they find this woman for him in Germany, and they're like, oh, she's this German princess. She's going to be great. They brought him a little picture because that's what they did back at the time, that somebody would paint a picture of them and they would bring. And so this is kind of a little catfish story, actually. And so there's some truth in that. When she arrived and the sort of marriage was already set between the kingdoms and all that, yes, he was like, what is happening? And he didn't really want to marry her. He married her in protest, actually. So that was a volatile relationship from what I've read and what I've seen. Not seen, like I was there. From what I've read and heard other people talk about. Okay, so the divorce was probably a good idea because they were incompatible as man and wife. They didn't spend much time together. Now, did he sexually assault her? Okay, now this is where it gets complicated as well, because legally you have to stipulate what is assault, and at that time they did not have that stipulation the same way that we do here. So if he did force himself upon her, that would have been completely illegal, especially considering who he was. So therefore it wouldn't have been considered assault. By modern standards, yeah, probably. Long story short, though, they actually ended up being friends after the divorce. Right? They actually stayed on friendly terms. They were better apart than they were together, which is kind of weird. And I don't know that would have happened if she had felt assaulted. Does that make sense? So, again, I wasn't there, so...
She lived. That's a win.
Oh, yeah. Right. She got out of that alive. So, yeah. Yes?
Talking about Gen Z and our generation, what is something as you as teachers have seen our generation talk about or say or do that scares you about TikTok, about the future?
That you don't read.
That is distressing. That's a real straightforward answer. Anything for you? Let's see. Okay, so a lot of people complain about Gen Z, although I have a larger complaint about millennials, which you are not the same as those.
I'm Gen X.
Okay.
Well, I'm in that.
You're on the edge.
Like that 80 to 82, because I was born in 80. So depending on who you ask, I'm Gen X
I'm talking
or
about
millennial.
like full-fledged millennials. The world owes me everything. I don't want to have any
refuse to
responsibility.
be a
I want to
millennial.
live with my folks and just sponge off of them. Human sponges. I really have a problem with those guys. But you're not that. But so you've taken some knocks, though. Like, oh, they're not as motivated. I think that you guys are actually more motivated to be better. Although I think that because you have grown up saturated with technologies, that you're having a hard time separating yourself from that. And it is problematically slowing you down in some ways. And the reading is a really big part of that, because I have heard time and time again from students your age, it's too much to read. A little bitty book with like 300 pages, and they're like, it's so much. I just don't think I will. You're looking for a shortcut because you're so used to shortcuts with technology that you're not willing to sort of invest in things that may take a little longer. That's problematic, my friends. You need to be able to engage in something that takes a while and get away from this sort of short burst, change the channel, snippets of this, sound bites of that. But you've been hammered with that really since you were small children. I can think about, I have children just a little older than y'all. I mean, they're adults now, but they're still just 7 to 8 years older than y'all. But I remember watching the things that they were watching. I'm like, oh my God, because it was like rapid fire, change, scene, noise, flash, sparkles. And those are the things that get your attention. Anything less than that tends to bore you. Reading is one of those things because you have to come up with those pictures in your head rather than the things that you've been presented. You've lived in a video world your entire life. And again, you struggle to distance yourself from that, I think. But in the long run, I think that you would be better if you would. That's just my perspective. Maybe you don't feel that way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I actually have hope for y'all. Give me hope because you're engaged.
Right.
You're smart people. It
Yes.
seems like you're more caring than millennials, and definitely Gen X, who we just sat around and played Nintendo. But like he said, it's the whole, the technology craze is such a big part of your life. And I think everyone is adjusting to having these computers basically integrated with our brains all the time. I mean, we think of technology integration as they got to put something in our brain or you got to wear a special contact lens. No, you're integrated right now. You never leave your phone for more than 5 seconds. And I don't know that that's a problem, but I also think that we're going through some transition where either we're going to figure that out or we're not. But yeah, that's y'all have to make this. I think you're going to see more change in your lifetime than any other humans that have ever lived.
You are extremely tech savvy, and that's impressive. Like you guys can find ways around things, you can do things, you can multitask. But multitasking has its downside as well. That's part of what I'm saying. But again,
ever asked them to find information on a website though?
Well, I know, but I'm not saying that there aren't. We can't advance.
You give them the CIA fact book, and they're like, "What's a hyperlink?"
Well, okay. But we have more faith in you, so that's good news. Yes.
Okay, so when do you think that America or even the world became so politically sensitive? Because right now everyone is so sensitive to especially politics. When do you think that came
The moment
about?
that they recreated religion. The moment there was religion, people were like, "You don't believe in my God?" They got real sensitive about that really fast. That wasn't where you were going with that, I know, but that's a point that I want to make. But you're talking about, okay, hold on, come back to the mic. Come on, you can follow up, because I'm kind of being an ass, but I wanted to really answer your question too. All right, so are you talking about like within the recent, like give me a time frame. Are you talking about like modern day?
More
when did
recent,
that actually start
yes.
becoming so, like the political correctness and the cancel culture?
Yes.
Is that what you're talking about? Okay, so I was just being jerk, but we will answer that though.
Here's my 2 cents. I think it's when people with no intelligence or know-how could communicate with other people that way. Most of human history, way more people are disengaged from everything. Like political infighting and stuff, that only happens on a few levels. And most people lived right next to people that believe just like them. That's most of at least American history. Your neighbor does what you do for a living, and y'all got along, and it was fine. And you don't talk politics or sex or anything like that. Now you are literally engaged with everybody, so you get to see so much more through. I mean, it started with CNN and 24-hour news, but I think the internet and social media has made it to where average people who really don't know what they're talking about, but they can get other people enraged. And then, of course, there's a lot of trolls online that just love to do that anyway, and that just throws more fire. So I think that, to me, is the basic element of because we're tribal by nature, so we have to get on our team. And I think everybody has done that because of all this. You had to pick a side.
Well, and that doing or thinking what your neighbor thinks has expanded through social media, and that's the compositional effect that you guys missed on your test today. The idea that social media has made it so much more and so much wider that it's not actually a small knit group or clan anymore. It's that big swath.
When James Madison was arguing that a large republic could quell these factions, he didn't understand the technology that was coming where somebody from South Carolina could engage with somebody from New York that's on the same team, and it doesn't matter about distance.
And this neo-pluralism that everybody has access to the internet, so it's fair, is BS. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, I agree. Yep.
All right. My name's Keaton. And I know America's in like a lot of turmoil right now. So I was sort of wondering what y'all think is the most realistic end to this. Because I know a lot of people are sensitive about being like, oh yeah, like America's never going to die or whatever. So I was just wondering what y'all were thinking.
Yeah, I knew. We will end.
Yeah, so...
Or look fundamentally different.
The fluctuation is going to be constant, So I don't know that America has to crumble in order for us to go through some sort of existential change. We've hit the reset button before. Civil War is a great example of that. Like, we were very different before that conflict than we were afterwards. Like, the republic changed. I don't think it has to be violent revolution. Huh? I'm sorry.
Constitution hit the reset button.
Yeah.
Articles of Confederation.
Right, yeah, that's true too. So maybe we just reinvent ourselves. I don't think it has to be this calamity. It can be. It has the potential to be. It has been before. It's been for lots of other people too. If we cannot find a way to come to some sort of consensus, I think that's definitely a problematic thing and definitely a warning sign that, there is impending doom perhaps, or that the reset's coming more, But I'm not going to sit here and try to predict that, because that could stretch on out for 50, 70, 100 years. But it depends on how willing we are to put up with BS from the government at the top too, because there is corruption that needs to be weeded out, and there is... we're doing it in our own state. Did they pass that with the new redistricting? Or are they just still debating that?
I don't know, Jackson.
They're about to split up Pulaski County into multiple districts, and that's going to change, or they're going to feed it out into other things, which will definitely change the voting block there. And then it's an effort specifically to try to eliminate moderate to left
they're
voters.
gerrymandering.
They're gerrymandering it right now. They're doing it right now. I don't know if you're aware of that, because you're talking about you don't pay attention to local things. But that's happening underneath our noses and barely getting any attention in the media.
Jackson's been working with state rep or senator? State rep.
They passed it in the House today, but okay.
House.
Yeah, well, it's almost a given that they're going to pass it though once it gets to the Senate.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. So they're entrenching this. They're doubling down on their party's domination of the state for possibly generations to come. The people in power get to do those kind of things. So is it corruption? Well, it only depends on how much of it they use then to wield against the majority of the people, if they do that even, in fact. How many people are they going to hammer? The wolf scenario that you brought up a while ago, are they going to use that power to try to bring some sort of consensus, or are they going to do that to try to continually snuff out voices of dissent? And what are our reactions to it if that is the case? There is that push between reactionary and radicalism, and how far does that go before we go, oh, let's get our heads together and come back to the middle and talk to each other again in a sensible way. If we keep pushing to the sides though, and we all go to the ditches and we start yelling at each other from there, like it's only a few steps before we start like throwing bombs at each other. I mean, really, that's how the world works historically. You got to find some way to the middle, middle path. Young Padawan. Yes.
Okay, so I'm Natalie Shunk, and I was wondering, obviously Mr. Nixon, you could look at this from the like law point of view, but what do we think about like the coronavirus vaccine mandates?
My AP Gov kids just went, "Oh crap," because they had to write essays about it. I mean, look, it depends on whether you believe that the national government should have more power or whether the state governments should have more power. Since 1905, the Supreme Court has held that states can require vaccinations. That's Jacobson versus Massachusetts. But there's an argument that the federal government can require it too. Under the Commerce Clause, because we move and we go around the country, we fly, we interact with people from different states. So there is an argument, at least, that a vaccine mandate or a mask mandate could survive under the Commerce Clause if Congress were to pass one, or maybe even survive Biden's executive order or executive action, I should say, asking OSHA to require masks or to require vaccines for federal employees, because that law, the OSHA, was passed under the Commerce Act. So it really depends, honestly, if you're a state's power person or a national government person.
It's also very true that it's hard to get around the vaccination mandates that are already in place. A lot of you guys had to get vaccines to come to school already. You've already had to do that. So this is not necessarily a unique addition to that story,
And I think it would be much easier if we got kind of lucky with the coronavirus. Who's to say that we don't have a much more severe version or even a whole nother disease tomorrow? And I think if it killed way more people, you would see not only the federal government step in, but they'd have support for it too.
You mean more people more quickly?
More people more quickly, just as contagious, more contagious. I mean, we are very adaptable creatures, and we just thought, oh, this is a weird thing, this pandemic. But human history proves that no, most humans have always lived with an epidemic or pandemic right around the corner. We just live in a sweet spot where we did, like my life, I didn't have one till now. But we don't know that this is, there might not be any end. So
then I go back to obligations of, your placement within a society. You're not just the only person that we have to deal with. You live in a society. You function around other people. Is it your right to be able to spread a disease to other people that is highly contagious, to whom it will be very deadly to some, right? And you don't know who that might be. You're just rolling the dice every time you meet somebody. I mean, so there are reasons and precedents that they might do it, and I mean, it's not necessarily problematic. Yeah. Hello.
Hi, my name is Ben Hollis, and I was wondering, out of all the people, all of the politicians in the U.S. government, who do you think is just like the worst person?
Person?
Nobody likes Ted Cruz, do they? I mean,
even his own family doesn't like him. I don't think. Don't write us letters, Ted Cruz people. I don't know. I mean,
I have so many. I don't want to start listing. Yeah, he's up there.
I think
Mitch is up
any
there.
obvious flip-flopper, and I'm not talking about on policy. I'm talking about on just other factors. Somebody that is very against this, and within 2 weeks, it's politically good for them to switch.
Who's driving me crazy right now is Kristen Sinema.
Yeah, I think everybody's kind of, what's her deal? Is it she's from Arizona and she's trying to...
I mean, I think it's a number of things. I think it's corporate interest. I think it's trying to keep her seat safe. But right now, she's the one that I'm really unhappy with.
I don't care for anybody who's belligerent. The reason you're there is to represent people. That's true, but you don't have to represent all of the. You don't have to represent all the assholes in your district, do you? Or only them? I mean, really.
I just want, what I want is people to say what they think and actually stand up for that. And if it means they lose the next election, so be it. Yeah. And we have very few of those.
Well, and there are a couple from the GOP who have received so many. The ones who voted on the second time to impeach Donald Trump have received so many death threats of their children and their family that they're just not running again.
Yeah, which is crazy to me. Like, again, in an open and free society, in a republic, supposedly, I mean, the idea that somebody voices their moral opinion about somebody who's very popular with a certain segment of society, and they were receiving death threats, and they're not even willing to run for an office that they've held for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 years. Like they've been good enough up to the hell now, but then you cross that barrier between somebody who's like, this media mogul, really, and suddenly you can't be in politics anymore because you don't support this guy. I mean, that's a weird moment that we're in. Back to the other questions that you guys were asking. That's not real good democratic process. Hello.
Hi, I'm Reagan Boshirs, and who's your favorite philosopher and why?
John Locke.
Yeah, Locke's
he has a
pretty good.
big impact on my life. Adam Smith.
I'm going to go further back. I'm going to go like,
Socrates.
Yeah, so I was going to go Socrates. Yeah, I mean, I really dig that guy and, Plato and Aristotle, those boys.
Hey, you ever been to Greece? We're about to go.
Hey, that's going to be awesome, by the way. Yeah, so the idea about, but there are other things besides Western philosophies, though, right? Like we could go and talk about,
Lao Tzu.
Yeah. Yeah, the Tao Ching from China, any Taoist thought, Buddhism. I mean, Buddha actually, Siddhartha Gautama is sort of like a philosopher, right? They go, he's a religious guy, but he's more of a philosopher than anything else.
Is Confucianism the most influential philosophy on the planet?
If you talk about statistically, like number of people, yeah, probably.
I have him ranked on my non-religious figures top just philosophy. Confucius is
but his stuff is not necessarily unique though. Like I like sort of middle path people who are willing to push people to think for themselves. Like I really like that idea. Think for yourself. But let's try to not just think any random thing and believe any random thing. Like let's try to find existential truths.
So my name is James Orm, and I'm asking this for a friend, but do you think it's worth becoming an American citizen?
I've always enjoyed it.
When is that citizenship test there, James?
Later in October.
Our South African friend.
To hold dual citizenship would be pretty. That opens some doors for you that might not be there otherwise.
In all seriousness,
for your friend.
I have citizenship in England and South Africa, and I'm not sure if.
I didn't realize you already had dual citizenship.
Go to England. No, I'm teasing.
Yeah, do the trifecta.
Yeah, they're just doing it.
Yeah. No,
triangular trade. Oh my God.
But yeah, so especially if you're going to continue to be
wrong.
functioning in this area for years to come, perhaps. There's some benefits to that.
Yeah.
All righty, you and your friend.
Okay, this will be our last three. We'll get these.
All right.
Quick.
Hello, my name's Liam Jeffers. Also, to add to the annoying politicians, Joe Manchin's pretty annoying.
Seconded.
Okay, so besides obvious things like getting rid of right to work laws and other stuff like that, how could we build up union culture and union membership in America? And do you think we'll ever get back to a union culture that we had, maybe say, like early 20th century?
We're corporate to the bone right now, sir, and I just don't know that that's going to go away anytime soon. And they're going to fight hardcore, tooth and nail. There's a lot of money at stake if unions are allowed to become, prevalent. If not just, realistically, union busting is kind of the trend. When did that really take off? Corporate. We've always had we've had to put antitrust laws and stuff in place, but when did it really sort of just be so domineering? When did the age of unions sort of die off? 70s?
Yeah, I was probably going to say 70s. Definitely by the 80s. I don't think we'll ever get back to that unless there's some cataclysmic event. Honestly,
you think you would think the pandemic would have an effect one way or
You'd
another.
think so.
Of course, I thought the pandemic would bring people together, and it separated people. So what do I know?
Yeah,
how can people came together at the funeral homes.
No. I hope the audio picked that up. It's funny. Been depressing.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't have a.
I think that's the answer. Yep.
Me?
Yep.
My name's Skylar Purefoy, and how do y'all feel about ancient aliens? Because there's so many crazy things that happen.
Yeah.
Like the pyramids lined up perfectly to the stars.
It's so crazy, yeah.
And lines in the earth,
the Nazca
lines.
lines.
Yeah, the Nazca lines.
Yeah.
How do y'all feel about it?
How do you feel about it?
Do y'all think it was real?
Believe it?
Do y'all think it was real?
I've had to answer this question a lot this year, so I'm going to let you do it.
Is there a possibility that that's what's going on there? I will say, yeah, there's a possibility. Is there a probability? Because I'm a probability kind of guy. It's probably not that. Although, like I said, I can't say definitively no. Again, that's what we were talking about a while ago with history. Like we might discover something that says, "Oh, it definitely was that," and then I would have to go, "Okay, well, the probabilities have changed."
Tepe or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, there seems to be some evidence that they're not ancient aliens, but humans that were more advanced that died off, and then the humans that came later, whether that was from some event where people had to go and hide in caves for 100 years or whatever, but the humans that came later didn't know what all that stuff was, and that's why we didn't know what hieroglyphics were or whatever.
Yeah, there have been multiple catastrophes in human existence. Like the modern us isn't really the modern us. Like we go, 10,000 BC. That seems like those people were so, like cavemen. That's not. No, those people were massively advanced to be able to build some of the things that they built and left behind. We still don't know how they did exactly what they did, but they were doing it prevalently across that region with Turkey and parts of Syria and down into what's now, Jerusalem and parts of Israel. Highly advanced. But then, whatever happened to it? Was it disease? Was it warfare? Was it drought? Was it a combination of those things? Was it aliens? I mean, again, I'm not going to say no to that, but at the same time, as far as I know right now, the probabilities are pretty low.
I mean, you could see right now if something globally happened that was horrible, where people had to hide in caves for, whatever, and we come back out and, 2 generations later, they don't know what computers are. They don't know what this building, they don't know what this writing means because they've been isolated for so long. So it could be that, or it could not. Who knows?
Blaine.
So the castle heads in Moai. I want to know, like, how do y'all think, like, they were built, and, like, what do you think they were for, and, like, they, like, represent, or, you know what I mean? Because, like, they're huge, and, like, I just want to know, like,
things like that fascinate me. To go along with that and the last question too, like the pondering of like how did they get that done? Like some of those statues are 70 tons. That's hard for me to even get my head wrapped around. Like how heavy is that really? Go, 70 tons. How many hands would you have to put on something to move a 70-ton object, regardless of whatever kind of leverage you might have?
No human rights and large whips.
Maybe just you crush. Every day we're going to move it 3 feet. That's our goal, and you do that for several lifetimes. I mean, I don't know, but there's so many of them, right? There's over 100, I think, and they're all moved from. They were quarried in the center of the island, moved out to the edges. They were put up on giant platforms. So how they did that with the technologies that they had at the time? There's some evidence that they were able to get ropes on them and kind of walk them a little bit, because you can pull, and they'll start to rock. But that doesn't tell me how they got them up and down hills or got them up on that big platform. I mean, brute force is, probably the most likely answer. And they deforested the island to get that done too. They cut down all the trees to be able to possibly like use them as rollers, to get them into spots. But then once the trees are gone and your water cycle stops, and next thing you know, people are having to scatter. And then other people show up and bring disease, and the people there, I mean, there's still a few of those islanders that are left, but they have completely lost the understanding of how the ancient people did what they did. So, I don't have a good answer for you. Most likely, they're either demigods, reference to some sort of higher power. Maybe it's an honor to their leaders. I mean, it could be that, representation of generations or a combination of all those things. That's most likely the story.
Well, let me promote our trips because, we haven't seen that, but like we're about to go to Italy and we're going to walk into the Colosseum and we know how that was built and we can stand in it. And then, of course, we're going to Greece. We're going to see the Parthenon. Like, people are capable of very incredible things. And you should go on a trip if you can.
Excellent. All right. We appreciate all the activity and the questions. You guys are awesome.
All right. That's the episode. Goodbye.